Okay, we'll start in about a minute, let a few more people come in, but just to go over some of the notes about if you're presenting and in the question and answer period, if you can read the question out loud, that way that gets captured in the recording, that'd be great. For people who want to ask questions, feel free to unmute, but it's probably easiest to just type your question into the chat. I will be posting the link to the peer review evaluation a couple times throughout. And then in case anybody has gotten a broken link for the capstone library, I think that link recently got moved. I will also post a link for that so that you'll know where all of the recordings are. And I think that's all the housekeeping type things. So Ryan, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you very much, Beth. I just want to make sure everyone can see my screen all right one more time before I get started.
Yep, we can see it and hear you.
Great. All right, so I'm Ryan Johnston. I'm going to be doing a presentation on a web map dashboard for real-time like weather hazard analysis. So quick background about where I work and what I do. So I'm full-time for the Army Reserve. I work at what's called a readiness division in California. And so we have a region of about 7 states in the southwestern US that we're responsible for. So from California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. We manage a lot of different things within those states, but one of the main things that we do is we're responsible for all the reserve facilities in the states. So that's it's over 130 facilities throughout that region, and we're responsible for all the funding and maintenance and contracting for the upkeep of the facilities. And so since I started here about a year and a half ago, a pretty consistent issue that we have is communication with the personnel who manage the facilities specifically. So since the facilities are so spread out and varied across all the states, what the reserves does is they designate a person who works in the facility. Basically, they're in another Army Reserve unit, and they designate them to be the manager for the facility. And once they get designated to do that kind of like extra duty, we give them some training. We provide them with some contact information and resources and stuff to get a hold of us so that they can help us with the funding and management of the contracts and everything. But for the most part, they don't really interface with us very often. It's really only if there's some kind of issue or something goes wrong that they need to get in contact with us. And so what this means is somebody could be in this kind of management position and never really have to reach out to us for a year or 2 years, really not until something happens. And then by that time, they're so far removed from the class or from like any communication with us. Usually they get a hold of the wrong people, and it takes a while for them to get back in contact with us so they can let us know that, hey, there's been some damage to the facility or something's broken. And so what we've learned is it's best if we can kind of reach out to them and make an initial contact prior to something happening. So currently we monitor wildfires during wildfire season. And then if there's some big national weather emergency that we see, we'll reach out to them and just say, hey, just a reminder, here's the contact information for us. If, this blizzard that's coming through damages your facility, we're the ones you need to reach out to so that we can start, making repairs or fixing anything. Contracting in the Army takes a long time. So when something gets broken or damaged and the personnel managing the facility don't know who to reach out to, it just really delays the process of getting a contract in place and getting things fixed. So, facilities will sit with boarded up windows or trees over perimeter fences or something like that for a couple of months sometimes until they get a hold of us. And then we can start, the several month process of getting a contract in place to fix it. So it really ends up extending the time that the facilities are damaged or that there's unprotected equipment or something inside the facility or inside a fence. So currently we use a dashboard that the Army GIS Center created, and it's an Esri online dashboard, and we use that to monitor wildfires. But it's a huge dashboard. It's got 50 different layers in it. It's really difficult to navigate and has really slow load times. So most of the people in my section aren't really experts in GIS, and it's hard for them to navigate the dashboard and really get to the information that we need off of it to see where the wildfires are. And then it's also missing a lot of information that we need for other weather hazards like blizzards, wind warnings, tornadoes, and things. So to monitor that kind of stuff, we end up having to try to sift through local news stations and everything to see if there's anything in a county or something that we have a facility in. And so it ends up taking a lot of time out of our day or out of our week to try and monitor and manage all this kind of stuff. So the solution that I'm proposing then is a web map dashboard that we would create internally and be able to manage. And so this way we can kind of streamline the data that's displayed in the dashboard so that it just displays the information that we need for our facilities and for our region. And then also so that we have a little control over it, and we can kind of tailor how it looks to what we need to build the reports and stuff that we build for our higher headquarters to show the status of our facilities. And so the basic system architecture then for this web map is pretty straightforward. So data will come in from outside sources. We're not collecting any data. The data comes from National Weather Service layers and a couple fire incident layers that are held on the Esri REST services as the database that we'll utilize. And then we just pull those in and then put them on our web map, which is sort of like our user-facing web map and dashboard that we'll use to monitor and track the wildfires and weather hazards, and then pull the related facility information. So the APIs and languages that I decided to utilize for the web map, I decided to go with Esri's JavaScript API, and then to utilize map layers that are on the REST services. This is because the current web dashboard that we utilize is an ArcGIS online dashboard. All the layers in it come from the REST services anyway. The military utilizes Esri for pretty much all their GIS needs, so it's the familiar data that we're already using, and then we already have a wildfire tracker that we've built that uses the JavaScript that uses Esri's API. So there's no need for us to reinvent it and try and put it in Leaflet or something like that when we really can't take advantage of what we would get out of like a FOSS thing like Leaflet or something like that. And then we'll utilize HTML, CSS, and Dojo to kind of build the dashboard and organize everything. So for layers, base map layer will be a light gray canvas layer with a state outline just for general reference of where the wildfires and facilities are. For thematic layers, I'll use current wildfire incidents and perimeters layers. Those come from, like I said, the Esri REST services. The data for those comes from the Integrated Reporting of Wildland Fire Information Network, or IRWIN, and National Interagency Fire Center. And so those sources are pulled every 15 minutes, and then those layers are updated if there's any updates found. So that it is pretty close to real-time information on wildfires from those two layers. And then we'll use that to build a buffer layer of impacted wildfire areas. And then we utilize the National Weather Service's watches and warnings layer for all our other weather hazard watches and warnings, and then a facility layer that I get from our GIS analysts of all our facilities, and then some of the contact information for the people who manage the facilities, so we can display all that in the dashboard. Potentially in the future, I might use the MODIS hotspot layer for wildfire information. That's a more up-to-date rendering of wildfire locations. The incidence layer and perimeters layer can be a little bit after the fact that they get built in. And so the MODIS hotspots layer is more real time where wildfires are currently, but it lacks a lot of the information that is in the wildfire incidence and perimeters layer that we kind of use to filter through. So I'd have to find a way to merge all those layers together. And I think that's beyond what I'm going to do for now, or really beyond what we need as far as like accuracy goes for the dashboard. For data preparation, we'll be querying the NWS warnings layer and the wildfire incidence layer. We already have a preset criteria for when we start to monitor a wildfire. If we monitored every wildfire in our area during wildfire season, we'd be looking at hundreds and hundreds of wildfires every day. So we kind of sort them down by like a size, how contained they are, and then if they have any residential impacts. So once the incidents have been queried, that gets compared to the perimeters layer. The perimeters layer isn't as comprehensive as the incidence layer, but comparing the two helps me find the actual center and location of the fires. Sometimes the incidence layer is put on like the point of origin for the fire, and then as the fire spreads, the center of the fire moves, obviously, and then I want to be able to buffer from the true center of the fire so that I have a more accurate buffer. And then we use this equation for the buffer radius. It's the acreage of the fire divided by 640. Then we take the square root of that and we multiply it by 33%. So this is a heuristic that they were using when I got to this division. I don't know exactly where they got it from. They explained it to me a little bit, but they were utilizing this to kind of get a radius in miles that they could put into another system to kind of search the centralized area of the fire to find out how many like reserve soldiers were there. They had no idea whether this was actually like an accurate radius for a buffer for a fire or anything. But you'll see in a minute, it actually works out pretty well. And so once we've got this buffer layer and then the filtered warnings layer, we'll do a spatial query versus the facilities. And then that way I can generate a list of all our facilities that are potentially in danger of a weather hazard, so we can start reaching out to them. So this is kind of what the wildfire buffer looks like once we've recalculated the center and once we've used that calculation to get the radius. So you can see in image 1 and 2, the white and red fire icon is where the point of origin of the two fires is. And then the teal dot and then the blue circle would be the recalculated center and buffer radius for the fire. So these are just two fires that I was able to pull, say in the last week or two. I've been managing this kind of like a wildfire dashboard, utilizing these formulas for about a year now. And this is pretty representative of how the buffer radius has fit the fire. So it does a pretty good job of matching the extreme ends of the fire, and then also kind of capturing a little bit outside of the wildfire location. This is the wireframe for how the dashboard is going to look. So in the center, we've got our main web map with the fire locations, the fire impact buffer, and then the different NWS warnings. Facilities are displayed in blue with a green or red ring to show whether they are impacted, aren't impacted. The right-hand frame will list any impacted facilities, or basically any facilities that fall within any of the watches and warnings or the fire buffers. And so those will be selectable to zoom to the facility, and then also to bring up the information about the facility in the bottom frame, which is going to be the informational frame where all of the pop-up information is displayed. So selecting a facility from the right, or a facility on the map, or any of the fire buffers or the NWS warnings will bring up information related to those things selected in the map. It'll bring it up on the informational frame at the bottom of the dashboard. And so this just gives us, like I said, it's a quick, much cleaner, easier to use dashboard for monitoring our facilities in the wildfires. We don't have to sort through all the different layers that we're currently sorting through in the Army's overall dashboard that they have. And then also I can tailor the information that's displayed about the facilities a little more here. And so that way we can get emails, phone numbers, contact information directly from here, so that we can start making contact right away once we identify a facility as being, in danger from some kind of weather hazard. So for my project timeline, I based this off of the 10 weeks for the next course for 596B. So I planned on spending the first 5 weeks finishing the dashboard and getting all the web map stuff completed. And then the final 4 weeks finishing up my paper, my abstract and everything. I'm having an issue trying to find a conference to present at. One, I don't really know what kind of conference this would be good to present to, except for maybe something internally at the unit I'm in currently, so I can just kind of familiarize them with the dashboard and show them what it does. But I'll be finishing up the program probably mid to late 2024, which also happens to be when I'm going to complete my job here at the reserve unit I'm with. So I'll be moving probably around November, October of 2024. So that also kind of hampers my conference presentation plans. I really have to wait and see where I go and where I'm going to be late 2024 before I can start deciding on where maybe I'd be able to present this at. So that concludes my presentation. I don't know if I'll open it up for questions or comments now.
Great, thanks, Ryan. And we can help you brainstorm some conferences too, in addition to Manju and you. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, there's one from Amy already.
Yeah, so the question is, how often are fire centers recalculated? Will you track the movement of the center over time to assess the trajectory of the fire? So right now, the dashboard that I have, it just recalculates every time the dashboard is reloaded. It isn't set to like reload or recalculate at a set time or anything. It's just every time on load, the script runs and it calculates the recalculates the centers. I didn't have any plans to assess the trajectory of the fire, but I could probably look into how to do it. It's probably a good idea, right? So then we could maybe see if the fire is growing away from an area or growing sort of to an area, because they do kind of grow in a linear directional fashion. So I think that's something I could look into, but it's not something I was planning on doing currently. Will anything need to be stripped out of the original dashboard so that nobody tries to keep updating the features / layers, and that one will be duplicated by the one you're creating? I'm sorry, Beth, I don't know if I understand exactly
I'm
the,
just asking if, just to keep people from going to the original dashboard that you have, will it be obvious to come to this one once it's in place? And
I see what you, so the original dashboard, I don't have any control over, which is kind of the problem. So the Army GIS Center manages it, and they're in, Mississippi or somewhere. It's just a kind of a happenstance that my boss managed to find this dashboard and start utilizing it for like the fire tracking. Really, once this dashboard is done, we just update kind of like our processes and procedures, and we'll just get rid of any links or anything to the old dashboard, and put all the links to the new one on there. I don't have any control over having anything removed from the old dashboard, unfortunately. Part of the problem.
yeah, and it sounds like if, once yours is up and running, that it'll be everybody's go-to anyway.
Yeah, so it's just utilized by myself and 3 or 4 other people that kind of work in the area I work in. So once it's done, and we kind of just let everybody know that this is the new one to utilize, it shouldn't really be an issue about anybody going to the old one.
Great. Any other questions?
Esri holds their developer summit in March. Might be a good venue. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir. Thanks for that. So Esri holds their developer summit in March. It might be a good venue to present. I'll keep that in mind. I'll look into that. I don't know if I can do. It wouldn't be March. I don't know if it would be March 24 or not. I don't know if I'll have the dashboard done in time, but I'll look into that, sir. Thank you.
Does your supervisor or anybody you're working with have any suggestions on, apart from what you said as an internal presentation? Are there any kind of conferences, like Army conferences, or anything that where they might benefit?
The only thing I thought of off the top of my head is so there's 4 readiness divisions in the reserves, and each one kind of manages a different region, right? So I said we do the Southwest. There's one for kind of the Northwest, Northeast, and Southeast. And so we hold rotating conferences on a semi-regular basis. It's like quarterly or every other quarter. And so I was thinking that might be a good place to present, especially if they decide, hey, we need something like this for our division as well, because it's kind of a place for all 4 of the divisions to get together and kind of share information and best practices on like managing the divisions and stuff. So I was thinking that might be a good one too. I don't know if the fact that I'll be moving later in 24 will have any effect on that or not, but it shouldn't.
Yeah, that does sound ideal if there will be people who might want to also implement this. Okay, great job. I don't see any other questions at the moment, but if you want to go ahead and put your email address into the chat, just in case anybody does have a follow-up question, that'd be great.
Sure.
Okay, and then if you can stop sharing whenever you're ready, and Todd Remmel is next. So Todd, you can go when you're ready.
Thanks, Beth. Hey, I changed my audio. Does this sound okay still?
Yep, still sounds good.
Perfect. The mistake of swapping your audio with a closed laptop never goes well.
And then you find out when you're on like the 3rd slide that nobody's.
Yes.
Are you able to share?
Yeah, I think I'm getting it there. Okay, you guys can see all that.
Yes.
All right. Hello, my name is Todd Rummel. I'm currently a graduate student enrolled in Penn State's MGIS program, and I appreciate the opportunity to present my proposed capstone project titled Integrating Geospatial Technology Within Naval STEM Education Initiatives. A bit of background, I am a DoD civilian currently. So it's necessary for me to cover a few topics as a bit of background to set the stage for how and why I chose my project topic. It's important to first understand that STEM and GIS can be incorporated into just about any class and activity. It creates so many possibilities for cross-curricular projects. And in STEM, the idea of project-based real-world learning matches the capabilities of GIS. Teaching with GIS employs an inquiry-based problem-solving approach to learning that also promotes valuable spatial thinking skills. This approach not only benefits the teaching of geography, but also science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, as well as the humanities. I added this quote here from Joseph Kursky, who many of you know. Today, spatial thinking is more relevant than ever before as issues such as climate change, economic globalization, urban sprawl, biodiversity loss, sustainable agriculture, water quality and quantity, crime, cultural diversity, energy, tourism, political instability, and natural hazards grow in importance on a global scale, but also increasingly affect our everyday lives. The Department of Navy, or DON, comprises of two uniformed services, the United States Navy and the United States Marine Corps. The Navy and Marine Corps STEM initiatives are collectively referred to as Naval STEM. Naval STEM executes and supports strategic opportunities that inspire, engage, educate, employ, develop, and retain the current and future workforce through a diverse portfolio of initiatives and investments. The Department of Navy's workforce includes civilians like myself, active duty sailors and Marines, and Navy and Marine Corps Reserve components. Beyond the Department of Navy exists a larger STEM ecosystem comprising of not only comprises, but it's not limited to academia, community colleges, federal agencies, industry, elementary, middle, and high schools, state and local governments, as well as nonprofits, each of which focus on many different aspects of educational and workforce challenges. These stakeholders who are external are important naval STEM partners. Increased coordination and collaboration among these Department of Navy organizations and external stakeholders will promote the effectiveness and efficiency of naval STEM programs and initiatives. This strategy provides the framework and vision for naval STEM efforts and highlights the opportunities for internal and external stakeholders to contribute to and engage with these efforts. The three focus areas of naval STEM programs include inspiring, engaging, and educating the next generation of scientists and engineers, technology professionals, and medical professionals, employing, retaining, and developing a diverse civilian and military technical workforce, and finally, collaborating across the naval STEM communities with other agencies to maximize benefits to the Department of Navy. Naval STEM's mission is an inclusive STEM culture that pioneers innovation and propels the Department of Navy and nation's workforce forward. And the vision is to deliver naval STEM education and outreach opportunities that inspire curiosity and shape a generation of talented, prepared for future global changes. This is a really cool quote. Let us state up front and in unmistakable words that strong naval STEM efforts are critical to America's future and are a matter of national security. So having shared that, you understand the important role GIS can play in presenting creative and inspiring STEM activities. We know that children learn in a variety of ways, but visual learning is especially effective. Using maps in the classroom, it illustrates geographic context, helping students connect lessons with real places. The use of geospatial tools to enhance these activities and promote student engagement develops critical thinking skills. The integration of UAV information and exercises into STEM curriculum is excellent for career preparation, given the widespread adoption of UAVs as tools across various fields. UAV-based activities not only help students grasp complex concepts, but also foster creativity, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills. This was actually an event that I participated in just a couple of weeks ago at a local elementary school. And these kids that you see in the middle frame are elementary, maybe 5th grade, and showing them a thermal camera and the ability to use a drone or a UAV, SUAS, blew their minds. They were super excited. This was a vehicle day. So you see in the 3rd frame, that's me, but to the right of me, you see the police car, and there's a bunch of other vehicles there. So we presented, and our vehicle, of course, were drones. So the kids, they had a blast. And we had 2 folks invite us back to other schools to do a presentation at a future date. So additional tools, and this is where I usually direct this to educators, but I think my audience knows this, can be found within the free ArcGIS Online offering available for public, private, home schools, and other organizations via Esri. So some other examples of GIS STEM activities that I've personally participated in, and I do this as a volunteer effort for my current job role. I serve as a GIS STEM lead and take time out of my days and year and visit different schools around the area. I've put together a small team that's growing of folks with geospatial backgrounds who are excited about STEM, and we've done some really fun presentations, creating GIS scavenger hunts. So during COVID, this was super fun because we had the opportunity to present activities that kids could participate with their families all across the country. Even England, we had somebody participate, collecting pictures of speed limit signs and manholes and benches, and then mapping all of these to a dashboard, and just giving them an opportunity to visualize the work that they put in of collecting this data and seeing it on a map with their friends and peers. This middle event was we had a teacher approach us. She was teaching a D-Day lecture for elementary school. And this is one of your top tier teachers that just went all out. You can see it's hard to see, but the props and everything that she had for the classroom, we volunteered to use ArcGIS Online and a story map presentation to come up with additional multimedia presentation for them. And then the third one is probably one of my favorites, was during a cybersecurity summer camp where the kids did a crowdsourced data collection activity. They each had 4 different color pieces of paper, and they manually placed them on the USGIF map that I had rented for the week. And they placed those on different locations based on where their friends or relative lives, or where they were born, or their favorite trip that they've ever been to. And then we turned that around and had them do that online using ArcGIS Online, and seeing the difference between manually collecting data. You see them, they're in their sock feet. So as 20 students laid down pieces of paper all over, and they started kicking them. So we got to show them, now look at the map. Your data collection efforts were manual, and you've kicked around these pieces of paper. So it's prone to error. So that really turned the light bulbs on for lots of kids, and was a fun activity. So presenting STEM outreach activities is great, but how are the impacts and the successes measured? Well, the Office of Naval Research, or ONR, manages the Department of the Navy STEM Coordination Office to foster student interest in the sciences, and hence build the future science and technology workforce. ONR requires naval labs to track and report STEM outreach metrics. Naval STEM is continuously assessing which projects to grow, sustain, or reduce. So you can understand this is a challenging process as naval lab locations and STEM activities are distributed across the country. So ONR collects a variety of metrics related to STEM outreach efforts. And these metrics may include a number of students reached, the demographics of those students, the number of teachers and mentors involved, the types of STEM activities conducted, and the impact of those activities on the participants. The specific metrics collected may vary depending on the program or project being evaluated. As you can see, the current process is manual, a famous Excel sheet, and can be prone to human error. So why is this needed? Reporting STEM metrics is very time consuming for leadership. As I mentioned, it's prone to human error and inconsistencies with multiple data attributes, making it difficult to compile reports. Unless reporting is kept in an updated format, the ability to quickly answer questions about STEM outreach efforts also exists. And then STEM leadership supports the idea of geo-enabling the metrics collection effort. However, understanding the big picture may be a challenge if it's not presented thoroughly. I've summed up the project goal and objective in this one sentence. With the goal of geo-enabling the collection and reporting of naval STEM metrics and the objective of providing leadership with an intuitive and interactive data visualization tool. So project overview, in the DoD, everything has an acronym. So SMART is the acronym that I've chosen for this project. It stands for STEM Mapping and Reporting Tool. It will provide leaders with the ability to collect important and consistent event metrics throughout the naval STEM community. The ability to collect STEM event data via a mobile device or a web browser. And it's built on the Esri platform using ArcGIS Survey 123 and ArcGIS Survey Connect, a SaaS geospatial technology. Reports can be generated using the Survey 123 website. And finally, an operations dashboard for visualizing the efforts and data collected by STEM leadership. So the methodology, I've broken this down to each of the components that will play a role in putting this project and this effort together. So ArcGIS Survey 123 will be used to analyze the results quickly, the ability to upload data securely, and having that data immediately available in the ArcGIS platform is a no-brainer. Survey 123 Connect will be used heavily as this allows for advanced development and provides a full XLS form authoring environment. Helps if you're familiar with authoring forms in Excel. It's done in human readable format, and it's a familiar tool that everyone knows. Gives you full control over the design and survey and its behavior, and works from any device and supports offline data collection, which is pretty popular or pretty rampant during STEM events inside of buildings with no Wi-Fi or with Wi-Fi. It's a perfect fit. Using ArcGIS Online, all Survey 123 items such as the survey forms, the location maps, the tabular reference data, survey records, feature layers, etc., will all be stored in the STEM ArcGIS Online account. ArcGIS dashboards are visual displays that present data in an easy to read format, including maps, lists, charts, and gauges. I'll create an interactive display of critical metrics such as upcoming and past events, event locations, dates, attendance totals, and more, with the ability to filter by region, event type, etc. This will be key in communicating current STEM outreach metrics to leadership in an easy to read visual format. And finally, to tie it all together, Creating an ArcGIS story map will provide instructions on how to use SMART, how to install the Survey123 app on iPhone or Android, or use the web version. It'll also include a link to the Smart Operations dashboard, which will be available based on access. And then the ability to embed a Survey123 form, an additional one for requesting a user account within ArcGIS Online. And then finally, some easy things such as providing QR codes and contact information will create an environment where anyone can go to learn more about SMART and how to use that for STEM teams spread out across the country. So I don't want to break everyone's brain by this slide. However, this is a survey flowchart. So starting with collecting an event at a STEM activity, and this is my flowchart from start to finish, capturing all of the foreseen metrics that would be critical to collect for an event. And of course, this might be tweaked as I get further down the line with data, but you can see, basically collecting event data, what regions, the STEM regions are broken up. I'm here in Charleston, and we work with New Orleans and the Norfolk area. So whether it's one region or the other, and sometimes there's joint efforts where two regions participate. And those are also, those metrics are important to collect. If you can imagine, if there's two regions with folks participating in one STEM event, how do you collect that information? And then, as with the ability to then further report on all of these metrics, it's important that they're captured upfront, and obviously a GUI, or that's that ArcGIS Survey123 interface will come to life as these are plugged in and built. Where are we going to get our data? So I've identified the Homeland Infrastructure Foundation level data, or HIFIELD, as an open data site, or it's an open data site providing National Foundation level geospatial data within the open public domain. The data is available in many formats, including CSV, KML, shapefile, file databases, and web services, GeoJSON, you name it, to support application development and visualization. HIFIELD contains, I think, over 320 public data sets, consisting of rehosted public data to direct pointers, also to live data services. So within that site, the education section has some really good public, private school data that I'll use to build this out with. Some of the data attributes that I'll focus in on, which also is included in that survey flowchart, are the event data, is the event attributes, the school attributes, and the volunteer data. Noting, if you'll notice under the volunteers, we'll be very careful with collecting names of volunteers. No other information really needs to be left out, as our STEM events are public. They're open. There's nothing being collected that shouldn't be collected. So just confirming whether we can collect first and last names, or maybe just collect the first name and last initial. But other than that, those are probably the key attributes that I'll be dialing in on. So project timeline. I've broken this out by month because it gives a little more flexibility instead of a week here, a week there. With work, sometimes I do end up going offline for a week, so it can be challenging. So kicking this off early will be pretty important. In August, verifying the metrics details required to be provided in the reports to ONR with STEM leadership. I showed you the manual Excel sheet before, and that was an actual sample of what was used in the past. That'll just need to be confirmed so I can make sure that I'm providing the appropriate collection attributes. And then review a proposed data collection workflow with leadership in August, as well as developing a SMART survey using 123 Connect. And that will take a good to most of the month of August and September, because that's a lot of the technical and advanced back end stuff that will need to be done to work with that data. And then September through October, developing the operations dashboard and including a design of a featured web map showing the event locations and testing that. Also in October, developing a sample report using Survey 123. I was just at the Dev Summit in Palm Springs this year, and they've added a bunch of new capabilities to that. So I'm excited about having this having the opportunity to do this now instead of last year. And then developing a story map with all the documentation and the user account request functionality, as I mentioned. In October, also presenting at NCG, more information on that next slide. And then November, soft launching SMART to a small audience. And then in December, after input and testing by leadership, start collecting initial metrics. So as I mentioned, I've submitted a proposal for presenting my capstone at the 2023 National Council for Geographic Education Conference, which will be held October 27th and 28th in Columbia, South Carolina. I know this event in the past has been held across the country, so being here in the Charleston area and that being in Columbia is a perfect fit. And I do have to thank Adrian Goldsberry for identifying that conference and us working together quickly within days of turning a proposal around to get that submitted. So I should find out here, and I guess this week, I think they said the first week of May, I'll find out whether I've been accepted to present there. So anticipated results, what will it look like? It will consist of key tools combined to track, visualize, and report STEM metrics. Web and mobile versions of Survey 123 forms used for collecting STEM event details, an operations dashboard used to visualize upcoming and completed STEM events, and then reports generated using filtered STEM event data. How will I test it? Using past and present STEM event data will be captured using the survey. The operations dashboard will then be populated with it, and then the data interrogated by filtering and selecting data points, allowing leadership to query and QA/QC the data. Finally, reports will be generated and reviewed, comparing them with like monthly, quarterly, and annual metrics. And then STEM leadership can compare the existing manual reports they create with the geo-enabled SMART output. And that sums up my presentation. I thank you guys for your time. And if you guys have any questions, I can answer those at this time.
Great job, Todd. It looks like Ryan has a question for you already.
Okay, let's see. Ryan, how do I expect licensing and pricing to work for the ArcGIS? Sorry about that. I had a little teeny window. How do I expect licensing and pricing to work for ArcGIS Online and Survey 123 components? Does DoD have an existing license for all of this, or will you need to ask for something new or use a Penn State license now? That is an excellent question. So currently, I'm being very careful about mentioning my workplace because otherwise it creates weeks of approvals. We do currently have an education ArcGIS Online account that I currently use for our STEM efforts. So that's been approved. Obviously, we don't collect any data other than what's going on at STEM events and keeping names and all that stuff out of that platform. So we plan on using that environment. Otherwise, I do work with DoD licensing, and so I'm staying away from all of that because, as you guys know, and as was mentioned earlier, it's quite a pain to deal with licensing through that. So I'm going to stay using the ArcGIS Online account through STEM. Let's see, there's another question by Fritz. Have you thought about the development cycle and getting a prototype into the hands of end users earlier in the cycle? There's a lot of information that you want to collect, and a simple, intuitive interface design will be critical. Who would be your test audience? So great question. We have so I serve as a GIS STEM lead, and there are other STEM leads within our STEM family. So I've spoken to each one of those folks and mentioned this, and have actually already started bouncing around some of the critical metrics and things that need to be collected. And they have been super excited about testing that, knowing that the manual process and the current process that myself and they use right now is a manual. So, what STEM events are you doing? And we submit that on a weekly and monthly basis to STEM leadership. And keeping in mind, this is like a volunteer effort. It's not even our full-time job. So to make it simple for us, the buy-in it's been real easy, as well as like mentioning no price tag. That's a hit. I think that's it. Did I answer everybody else's questions? I see some good comments.
I'll just chime in case anybody is still typing. I think that conference sounds like a perfect match. I have been to that quite a few years ago, but I'm sure there will be lots of people who are interested in this. And I was just curious how far reaching or sort of what events are these, just Navy STEM events that you're pulling into this, or just anything STEM related?
So again, I don't want to say I cheated. I've advanced this too far, but I've verbalized this, and it's been verbalized already to ONR, who's very excited to see this. But it is specifically Navy. Now, that's not to say that this can't be replicated. What's being built can be tweaked to be used for other STEM initiatives as well, even on a smaller scale.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I think a lot of us, Bert's in the room, a lot of us who are obviously trying to get more K-12 GIS folks and to have geography not be a discovery major in college and things like that would be really excited about this. It would be nice if it was as far reaching as possible.
Oh, thanks, Beth. And I started out with the idea of doing something really technical and like DoD based. And then I really enjoy my STEM outreach opportunities. It gives, it's like a chance to tell folks about share GIS and mix in a little DoD stuff. But seeing the lack of GIS and STEM and the opportunity to do this is pretty exciting. And the attention that it's getting early on is also exciting. So I'm excited to have the support from Penn State as well as DoD STEM or Naval STEM currently.
Yeah, it'll be fun to hear how the conference goes and what happens beyond that. Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Okay, if you want to go ahead, I guess put your email address in the chat as well, in case anybody wants to follow up. And then if you can stop sharing, and we will move on to Megan Perone. Megan, you can go when you're ready.
Okay, sounds good. I'm gonna share my screen here. All right, everything looking good?
Yes.
Sounding good? Okay. All right, so hi everyone, my name is Megan. This is my project titled Invasive Species on the Move, using machine learning models to predict emerald ash borer dispersal within the Oregon ash range under climate change. And so, as the name suggests, the emerald ash borer, or EAB, is a tree boring beetle that selectively colonizes ash trees and is native to Northeast Asia. Since its accidental arrival to 30 years ago, EAB has decimated tens of millions of trees in eastern North American forests. So in Asia, ash trees exhibit significant resistance to the beetle, so they tend to attack stressed or dying trees. and their populations are further controlled by natural predators. Whereas in North America, EAB has attacked every ash species it's encountered, regardless of the tree condition, and biological controls have had limited impacts. So once a population colonizes an ash tree in North America, without any intervention, ash mortality is almost guaranteed. And this is largely a result of larval activity in the summer months. So neonate larvae will bore through the tree's phloem and cambium layers in distinct S-shaped galleries. And this boring behavior effectively girdles the tree, preventing it from transporting any water and nutrients to the rest of the organism. And so the following summer, EAB will emerge as adults, leaving behind characteristic D-shaped holes. And then once canopies, so they'll feed on the ash trees, and then once those canopies of the trees are in visual decline, we can expect tree death to occur 2 to 4 years later. And so the ecological impacts of rapid and widespread ash death have cascading effects. So some of the direct effects include the large and sudden canopy gaps in the forest, and this will allow for invasive species to rapidly colonize the understory if they are already existing. And widespread ash mortality has also led to a serious concern for the local extinction of the 70+ arthropod species that rely on ash in North America. And then increased woody debris from the fallen ash trees will disrupt nutrient cyclings. And then on a larger scale, the impacts of sudden and widespread ash loss are resulting in lasting changes to forest structure and composition. And then, so as far as EAB management, it's largely been characterized by spread prevention, and early eradication efforts were largely unsuccessful and becoming extremely expensive as EAB was spreading. So EAB can spread in 2 ways: short range and long range. And so short range spread usually occurs as adults can fly up to a few miles looking for a new host. And long range dispersal typically occurs during the transportation of infested forest products, where EAB spread as hitchhikers. So for short range spread prevention, these techniques include increasing the size of fire breaks beyond EAB flight capabilities, injecting infested trees with insecticide, and releasing natural predators from EAB's native environment. But as I mentioned, these have had limited impacts. So long range spread tends to be the way to prevent a lot of their movement. And this is most often addressed by placing quarantines on forest products before moving them out of infested areas or suspected infested areas. And then other methods of spread prevention include preparing local government agencies and for EAB spread, and then increasing public awareness of this issue. So here's like a poster of things that would be rolled out, or like content that would be rolled out for the public. So despite consistent efforts to mitigate their movements, the EAB continues to spread west across the continent. And so in June of 2022, EAB was discovered outside of the Portland, Oregon area, representing the first known presence of EAB on the West Coast. So the arrival of EAB poses a major threat to the Pacific Northwest and the West Coast in general's only native ash tree, which is the Oregon ash, Fraxinus latifolia. And the remoteness of this new detection, like as an outlier on the West Coast, indicates that it was spread as a hitchhiker, likely through the transportation of forest products. So a little bit more about the Oregon ash. In ideal conditions, the mature Oregon ash trees can reach 60 to 80 feet and can live over 250 years. And the native range of the Oregon ash stretches from the base of the Puget Sound up in Washington down to Southern California and into some of the Angeles forest. So Oregon ash grows best in mild, moist climates, much of which characterize the Pacific Northwest, with cool, wet winters and warm, dry summers. And because the root systems are adapted for more moist soils, Oregon ash is most often found in riparian areas or wetlands, or really anywhere that receives seasonal flooding, like old agricultural fields. And then in areas that receive consistent precipitation, Oregon ash can extend into upland forests. So here they are at the bottom of the Cascade Ranges, and then here at the bottom of the Sierras, and then they follow a lot of the coastal ranges. So similar to most of its North American counterparts, Oregon ash plays an important ecological role in riparian systems due to its ability to thrive in wetter conditions. And its unique ability to stabilize stream banks and control sediment movements and moderate stream temperatures with the shade of their branches for migrating fish. It's been a widely used tool for riparian habitat restoration. And as a result, the ecological impacts of widespread ash loss are expected to be the most devastating in these types of systems. And unfortunately, research trials have indicated that Oregon ash in particular is highly susceptible to EAB infestation. And so this also brings in kind of the role of climate change, where on the West Coast, rising temperatures and reduced soil moistures are expected to limit the range of Oregon ash under certain projections of climate change. And then at the same time, these trends are shifting the geographic distribution of EAB into both higher elevations and higher latitudes. And so given that short range EAB dispersal is limited to the locations of their hosts, accounting for the role of climate change in both of these species distributions is going to provide a more accurate and useful estimate of EAB movements over time. And so since spread prevention has proven to be an optimal tool for EAB management, understanding where EAB is likely to spread is a valuable tool for developing comprehensive management techniques. And so this is an example of that technique where the USDA and APHIS are trying to predict where EAB might spread or where they have high risks of spreading. And so one way to predict this spread is utilizing the MaxEnt model. So the MaxEnt model, which is short for maximum entropy, is a machine learning model that estimates presence probability from an event of a small handful of event presence locations, and then a study boundary and a set of explanatory variables. And this model has been used to predict the spread of EAB in North America already, but this has that study was largely confined to the range of Eastern ash species because that's where the EAB was currently, but it hasn't been used on the West Coast and it hasn't been used using West Coast species. So essentially what I want to do with this project is better understand EAB dispersal on the West Coast in a rapidly changing climate, employing the maximum entropy model to estimate EAB presence under future and current climate scenarios. So a little bit deeper into the MaxEnt model, also known as the presence-only prediction under the Esri tools. The model creates training rasters, which contrasts environmental patterns at the known event locations to patterns across the study area in order to produce an output that describes the probability of an event occurring everywhere within this boundary. And so by relying on the presence points only to make these predictions, the model limits the assumption that it makes to only the known data, which gives it the name of maximum entropy, because it takes a maximum entropy approach. So the maxent model inputs, or the data that I'll be using basically, is a study boundary that's limited to the states within the Oregon ash range, EAB presence from the initial detection site only, and then a set of explanatory variables that are based on the habitat requirements of both species and the dispersal mechanisms of EAB. And so that's where I'll include both the long and short range variables. And so the study area is going to be including 3 states that comprise the native range of Oregon ash. And these states include Washington, Oregon, and California, which make up the west coast of the United States. And so in the case that EAB continues to spread throughout the Oregon ash range, this study will include all of the appropriate governing bodies. And so for the EAB presence location data, it'll be limited to the West Coast occurrences that originated from the initial detection site in Forest Grove, Oregon. And aside from this detection, there's no known additional occurrence of EAB on the West Coast. And then this data will come from the Oregon Department of Agriculture. So a little bit into the Oregon ash habitat requirement variables. They will include elevation, soil type, precipitation, and the range boundary. So Oregon ash tends to grow at the base of mountains, which means it's typically occurring at lower elevations. And while it does occur at higher elevations, it tends to form pure stands, which is more likely to occur at elevations below 1,500 feet. So because Oregon ash prefers moist soils, the soil type will also be included. This is coming from the Sergo database. And then because precipitation trends inform soil moisture and water availability, it'll also be included. And then finally, a geographic boundary of Oregon ash will be included. And this is more to just visualize the change over time, given the inclusion of climate scenarios in the future. And so this is just what they'll look like. And then the next set of explanatory variables are based on EAB presence. And so they'll be represented by temperature, seasonality, and proximity to major roadways. So EAB can't survive under certain temperatures, and adults are more likely to only exist between a 3-week period between June and July, and they're more sensitive at that time. So the minimum temperature of the coldest month, the maximum temperature of the hottest month, and the minimum temperatures in June will be included to represent temperature. And seasonality, which is a range of temperatures throughout the year, is basically the max minus the min, is included in the research because EAB life cycles rely on distinct cold and warm systems or seasons to initiate transitions in their life cycles. And then the proximity to major transportation routes are going to be used to account for long range spread, as studies indicate that over 8 out of 10 new detection sites occur within a kilometer of major transportation routes, which is the case for this new detection. And so to factor in climate change, this project will account for climate change by running the exact same model using future projections of the climate data. So this will be the case for things like precipitation, the seasonality, temperature, things like that. And specifically, I'll be using climate projections from 2021 to 2040 because it provides the most relevant timeline for invasive pest management. But it does, the nature of this project allows for an extension of that timeline. And I'll be employing 2 different warming scenarios, an intermediate or a business as usual projection, and then the highest warming scenario up here. And so essentially I'll be running the model 3 times, one for current climate conditions, one for future climate conditions under a moderate warming scenario, and one for future conditions under a high warming scenario. And so finally, a little bit more about me and my connection to this project is that I've been an environmental professional for a few years in the Portland area. I've planted hundreds of ash trees myself, and I've actually worked on the restoration site that found that where the ash tree was found, the EAB was found in the ash tree. And so I have a very hands-on personal connection to this issue. And so the fact that I have an opportunity to share these results with the Oregon Department of Agriculture and the EAB task force for Oregon is exciting, because I have the potential to directly inform future management decisions. And then just as a final note, I wanted to take a second to thank my advisor, Brandy, for all her guidance on this project. I've really enjoyed everything I've been learning. And so with that, I'll take any questions or comments.
Great job, Megan.
Thank you.
We have some questions in the chat. I'll go first. I'm just kind of chuckling to myself thinking about that first instance that was found in Washington State or kind of on the border there, and how intense has is that area just being, really rapidly sprayed, or how, what's happening there? So a lot of the data that I'm going to be using, the detection data, is based off of like heavy surveys that they're conducting in that area. And so they're just trying to really monitor and then address the trees that have found to be like positive detections. And so like right now that's about 54 trees, I believe. Great. I hope they're able to contain it. Looks like Fritz has a question.
Yeah, so the question is, you mentioned that the temporal validity of the MaxNet model prediction is 21 to 2040. However, do you think that running the model in the near future, like every 5 years, to see how prediction changes would be as helpful as new data is derived? Yes, I think that would be effective, especially because like a smaller timeline is more realistic. But I'd have to look into how that data would be available, because these climate models that I'm using are a little bit more general. And so I think maybe a more focused model might be available. But yeah, I can definitely look into that.
This isn't really, I just have another question while people are typing, hopefully.
Yeah.
I've thought about the emerald ash borer a lot because there's such devastation here and, on our property and things. And do you know, just from your research, if there have been any more recent advancements in like parasitic insects that can attack the borer?
I think I think that, well, from what I know, they've released 4 types of parasitoid wasps, and I just don't think that they have the capability to keep up with how fast the EAB is spreading, and so that's why they haven't been so like useful. And so they're using I think they're trying to find more technical and creative solutions to addressing this issue. And like one of them is finding, like, I think the green or blue ash is pretty resistant to, just naturally resistant to a lot of the EAB. So I think they're trying to locate like what gene makes them resistant, and they're going to try to genetically modify other ash trees. And they're coming up with solutions like that because I think like biological controls are just not appropriate for the scale of the issue now.
Great, thanks. Yeah, it's so interesting because, as you know, if it does go there and kills off this native species, and then it's sort of a vicious cycle where the tree that takes over then has its own issues and affects
Right.
fires and all of those other things. So it's so fascinating how one thing can set off such a chain reaction.
Right, yeah, like there's so many different types of cascading effects that I couldn't mention, but they're pretty much endless, and they're probably everything that you'd expect them to be.
Well, great job. Very interesting project. If you could put your email address in the chat,
Oh yeah,
I'm sure we'll get some follow-ups.
yeah, thank you. And then I'll stop sharing here.
Okay. And Lindsay Treleo is next. So Lindsay, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and start.
Just making sure everyone can hear me and can see the slides.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So afternoon, everyone. My name is Lindsay. I'm currently enrolled in the Master's in GIS program. My advisor is Dr. Gregory Thomas, and I'd like to express my thanks for him to all his help and guidance throughout this process, and as well as Brandy. My proposed project title is creating a dashboard to identify and enhance preventive search and rescue efforts. So the following provides an overview of what I'll be discussing. To understand more about the topic, I'll first start out with the background to ensure everyone has a baseline of the concepts and terms of art that are involved with search and rescue, which I'll be referring to as SAR. Then I will provide a more in-depth look at preventive search and rescue efforts, also known as PSAR, and kind of how that fits into search and rescue overall, as well as successful examples of PSAR efforts. The next section will provide information about the specific study area that I chose and the goals and objectives I would like to accomplish with the project's completion. I'll then go over my proposed methodology, which will discuss my data sources, their limitations, in addition to providing an overview of the proposed methodology I hope to use to complete the interactive dashboard. The anticipated results section will provide insight into what I expect to produce from the project, and future considerations will address certain decisions and actions that are currently impending that will affect the overall outcome of the dashboard. I will then discuss why the project is important to not only in developing my experience with analyzing data visually, but also how this benefits others. Finally, I'll conclude with a timeline for when the project should reach completion. Okay, so before I can delve into PSAR, preventive search and rescue, it's important to talk about SAR concepts, and then specifically, this will be focusing on wilderness search and rescue, also known as YSAR. The National Park Service shows that trends in visitors to national parks has only increased. They had data that showed from 1904, about 120,000 people were visiting, and up into 2022, there have been over 300 million, with a total of about 15 billion visitors from 1904 to 2022. Out of these numbers, thousands of people end up using SAR services each year. The search aspect remains the most challenging, more challenging than rescue, as missing persons must be found before obviously the rescue can actually happen. Searches become initiated when relevant authorities receive a notification of a lost or missing person. These vary how these actually come to be. They're generally triggered though because they're late for a check-in, they're lost, stranded, disoriented. People underestimate their physical fitness. There could be a plane crash, or someone just becomes injured. And the optimal variable, which is usually most critical, is time, and that will decide whether an operation switches from a rescue to a recovery of the now presumed missing person. Other factors that are specific to YSAR that make it more challenging are topography, weather, environmental hazards, in addition to just the overall lack of information regarding the circumstances around the person missing. Because it's not like they're going missing in the city where there's cameras and there's more people about. These generally tend to be in areas that are more isolated. Another challenge with YSAR is just there's also minimal data sharing efforts going across all the different people that engage in SAR operations. So previous studies, GIS tools have been leveraged in several different ways to improve YSAR efforts. They tend to focus on lost person behavior, probable analysis to delineate search areas, and management of search operations. In this part, I thought I would kind of lay out some key terms, because when I was going through, there was a whole bunch of different points and information that become kind of critical to the SAR operations. So these include last known point, where the last person was last seen, looking at lost person behavior, which is essentially comparing where the person was lost to where they are found, and to see if there are any common behavioral patterns, which a lot of GIS techniques have employed, like mobility models, to calculate this information. And then there's the incident planning point, which is generally where the home base of where the SAR operations are going to occur. And then there's also been a movement to look at mobile applications, so kind of using those in the field to direct current SAR operations that are going on. So while trying to make YSAR operations better is to help to find lost people, there's an emerging area called PSAR, Preventive Search and Rescue, which is a tactic employed to reduce the number of incidents through education and other mitigating measures. Having knowledge of YSAR incident attributes allows for risk reduction and implementation of preventive education about problems in wilderness areas. So for example, if you're seeing someone, that's the main activity that they're getting lost in hiking, and because they're getting dehydrated, maybe it's worth it to say, like, you need this certain amount of water if you're going out for this specific amount of time, to make sure that they're adequately prepared. So this data contributes to PSAR efforts, and statistical analysis on where people go missing helps identify areas to also help these efforts. For example, if people are going also lost in certain areas, maybe there needs to be signs or a ranger station. While there have been studies on PSAR before in national parks and on the existing data set I'm using, they differ. For the Adirondack data set that I'll be using, only 2 years were previously analyzed, and they did not focus only on preventive efforts. Other data sets from parks have provided analysis sections relevant to PSAR efforts as well, but they did not focus exclusively on that effort. In addition, I was unable to find in any previously literature about creating an interactive dashboard displaying only PSAR information for wilderness search and rescue. So PSAR programs have been proven to be effective when employed in the past. 2 programs that were implemented before was the Grand Canyon National Park was one, and that exemplifies a success story, as they were able to decrease the amount of SAR incidents that occurred within its jurisdiction. They instituted a program to reduce these incidents in 1998, and there were 2 follow-on studies that showed that the incidents decreased at different rates over time, and the reduction of ranger responses resulted in about saving over $300 million annually. So another one was the Yosemite National Park, which implemented a PSAR program in 2007. Studies on YSAR data from Yosemite show that descriptive statistics showed produced results with regards to who, what, where, and why people were becoming lost. and allowing for tailored preventative efforts from people becoming lost, thereby just passing YSAR operations. So my study area is specifically looking at Adirondack Park in New York. So I gathered some just specific information about YSAR operations in that area. So in Adirondack Park, each year, over 300 individuals are lost or injured, and they require emergency response efforts. Most of these events occur during recreational outings away from roads and local emergency services. Responses to these emergencies occur through a network of state and local agencies. Central to these are the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, or DEC, forest rangers who are stationed throughout the state. Each ranger has a geographic territory in which they live and is responsible for the preservation, protection, enhancement of the state's forest resources, as well as, most applicable here, the safety and well-being of the public using these resources. So on the right, I also included, there's a list of YSAR groups that help and assist with the DEC forest rangers. A lot of these are volunteer groups, and as you can see, they're kind of broken down based upon the area in Adirondack Park. So the main goals of my project are to establish a template that focuses on displaying information for specifically PSAR efforts that can be implemented to increase public safety and identify specific populations and activity that most use YSAR operations. The objective is to display this information in an interactive dashboard that it can be leveraged to target specific PSAR efforts. And while this is specifically going to be focusing on data from Adirondack Park, my hope is that this can be used as a template across people that engage in SAR operations. The map below shows the boundary line of Adirondack Park, which is the study area for the project. It contains over 3,000 lakes, 30,000 miles of rivers and streams, and a myriad of different habitats. New York State created it in 1892, and it encompasses about 6 million acres, earning its designation as the largest park in the contiguous United States. It's important to note that there are different types of areas and ownership types. So there's private, public, and they consist of forestry, agricultural, and recreation. With regards to the population, there are approximately 130,000 people, and they live in about 100 towns and villages surrounding that area. And as of 2023, the Adirondack Park Council reports that there's about 12.4 million visits each year to this area. So this graphic represents the proposed methodology for the dashboard creation. This is just an overview, and the next couple of slides, I'm going to go more into depth into each part of it. So the first step is to obtain the data. The boundary line of Adirondack National Park was downloaded as a shapefile from ArcGIS Hub, and it was produced from the New York State Adirondack Park Agency in 2017. The SAR data set that I found is named Wildland Search and Rescue Missions by the New York State Forest Rangers beginning in 2012, and that's publicly available from the NewYorkState.gov website and provided by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. It was last updated on March 30th, 2023, and was downloaded as a shapefile. And then the Adirondack Park Agency provided a shapefile to depict most currently available, the 2021 private and state land classification information. So data regarding YSAR incidents range from January 2012 until December 2022. Some incidents contain multiple missing persons, and each person's demographics were captured separately, but each incident will be counted as a separate one when doing the demographic analysis. With regards to the heat map and dot density, data will have to be removed to because of the duplicate incident number, so not to count the same incident twice. The data sets also contains information for multiple parks. But I wanted to pick the one with the most amount so I'd have more data. So I picked Adirondack, which has about 3,414 incidents. The boundary line will be just added into ArcGIS Pro, and the Adirondack agency provided that land classification, which will be converted into a raster file and then added into ArcGIS Pro. So using ArcGIS Pro, a heat map and dot density map will then be produced based upon the found locations using the cleaned up data set. The categories and nomenclature will remain the same with that of the New York State Forest Rangers. The analysis will result in one map with 2 data set layers. I'll then do a co-location analysis of where people were found and compare them to the land type to see if there's any correlation, to see if people become lost in certain land cover types. Finally, spatial association between zones will be run to determine, to compare the change of area over time to see if that would affect where missing people are found. Once these maps are created, then I'll be publishing them as a web map. The maps in ArcGIS Pro will then be created as a web map, and then the dashboard will be created from that web map. The relevant maps will be hopefully be able to toggle in between to see them. And then the following elements will be added under there to include demographics of missing persons. So I do have the sex, the age, the country of where they came from, the activity engaged before the SAR service was needed, the number of rangers per incident, the average time before start and the search ending, and whether or not the missing person was found in relevant search areas proposed by the SAR team. Interactivity between the data will be added. And right now, I think I'm focusing mostly on time analysis, so by the year. The expected result is to create a dashboard that identifies trends and patterns to implement PSAR tactics that will hopefully result in a decrease in the number of people actually needing SAR services in the wilderness. While the proposed data set is specific to Adirondack Park, this data set exemplifies some of the typical information collected and would provide a template for other YSR data for visual analysis, in addition to highlighting other possible statistics. The dashboard is expected to identify hotspots of where most SAR missing persons are found, the common activities and demographics of the people going missing to help institute training and education techniques, identify specific times of year where SAR operations are more prevalent, and identify change in land cover to see if any of those impacted where people were found. The dashboard will benefit parties to include YSAR teams, government entities, and the public. By highlighting populations and areas to implement preventive measures, it can help prevent people from going missing in the first place. If this is not created, a greater understanding of the historical trends will be impeded, and instead of focusing on people already lost, it can stop them again from needing rescue in the first place. So with regards to future considerations, what elements on the dashboard, in addition to which ones I still make interactive other than the year, still need to be decided. The data set I have has some limitations, as I don't have the exact point where people were lost. I just have the general classification area and the county, which is why I was focusing on looking at the specific land cover type. But I did put in a Freedom of Information Law or FOIL request with the New York Department of Energy Conservation. So they could hopefully provide me with more specific information, such as the last known point location. Once I have that information, that will change, because I'll probably put more of an emphasis on that on the dashboard. In addition, some elements will be more important than others. For example, I do have information in the data set that discusses like the number of people involved in the search and rescue operation, length of time to complete if other partners were involved. And while this information doesn't seem necessarily relevant for a PSAR campaign, It could help quantify the efforts of one that's been implemented, so it can prove kind of its benefit by looking at resources. So for the project's value, an examination of historical data, it can provide many benefits. They assist with trend and pattern identifications, which can direct workforce planning and future infrastructure, such as station locations. Historical data can identify critical hotspots and enhance post-rescue analysis and future training. The dashboard will allow for a synthesis of data to be gathered in a single place and makes it accessible to all interested parties. The information can also find links that previously would not have been found with data just gathered one by one and in an Excel spreadsheet. And successful PSAR programs relies on studying the attributes of the missing to target education efforts. And a dashboard displaying this information will bolster this. Second, there's just seems to be an overall lack of information regarding the circumstances around missing persons, and the minimal data sharing impacts YSAR efforts. For example, YSAR park personnel do not always acquire information that can be helpful for geospatial analysis. As I discussed previously during the background section, some of this information includes the incident planning point, the last known point, and it's rare to kind of have a centralized database to house this information. So I think that this project can highlight that there is a need to start collecting this information. Third, the dashboard does not display any category of data that are, again, unique to this study area and can be implemented in any area that uses these types of operations. YSAR is costly, and using information for a targeted PSAR campaign can reduce resource strain in addition to increasing preventable injuries and even death to the public. Finally, this project has value to me, as I am regularly looking to find better ways to visually analyze data. Like Todd, I could not use work data due to restrictions. So this is helpful because it allows me to leverage techniques and the methodologies to information and data that I can use at work. So on this slide, this graphic depicts my proposed timeline for the project. So after this course concludes, I have 2 remaining classes in the summer term. During this time, I hope to get the final response from the Freedom of Information law request that I put in to the Department of Environmental Conservation. But they are notoriously slow. So this is why I did this a couple months ago and I have not heard back, but I think that will also help with the emphasis of kind of what I want to put in the dashboard. And 596B begins in August, and I hope to have finished kind of creating the dashboard within a couple of weeks of that course beginning. I would then like to hopefully publish in 2 journals I would feel best display the work, which would be the Adirondack Journal of Environmental Studies or the Wilderness and Environmental Studies. And then hopefully the final capstone project would be completed by the end of October, and I would be graduating around that time. So thanks, and if anyone has any comments or questions, and I have references here.
Great job, Lindsay. I just have a quick question while people type. I know that you said you were going to intend for this to be used more widely beyond just the Adirondacks. I noticed that the GIS Corps seems to be quite involved with the Mountain Rescue Association. So had you learned about that or knew anything about that, and thought to target them at all, or thought to target some, that organization, I guess?
So I did look at them, and they did have a dashboard from 2017 that kind of highlighted just where their operational incidents were. And I did find that there was like an international database, but it was locked down. I could not get access to it. So I think it's helpful to, like you said, target them as well, and kind of all the different parks that engage in these services. I think if I was able to publish this in the magazine, a journal article, I think that would help kind of get the word out there. But yes, definitely I've looked at them and I've kind of wanted to see what everyone was doing. I know in Wyoming, there was also kind of a dashboard that displayed their incidents again, but it was more focused on not necessarily preventive search and rescue. So I definitely would want to, I mean, I'm open to suggestions too on how to kind of reach out to other groups to see if they would be interested in this.
Yeah, I think your plan sounds great with those publications, and it sounds like there will be a lot of interest.
Okay, so I was wondering if you considered including other variables such as slope, topography, in addition to land cover. There could be common patterns of incidents with regards to slope topography. This data may be something that could be derived from the Freedom of Information Law. So yes, I did consider that. I was debating going back if I wanted to add that in because there is access to on the New York State website regards to like a DEM and all that stuff. But I think it was leaning more into the lost behavior patterns. And for that, it was more of I didn't have that point found where they, or sorry, the point where they initially went lost. It was harder to kind of track their behavior. So that's kind of why I decided not to go that way of including that. Okay, and then I always think it's great when students do projects that incorporate elements of human geography, or in this case of a bit of environmental psychology, lost human behavior. And GIS, yours is an example of this. Did the studies you located in your background research about lost person behavior incorporate GIS or some other geospatial technology? Yes, so lost person behavior, a lot of them were using different type of mobility models. So they were using ring models and then coming up with their own algorithms. But the most important piece to that they were using was they had the actual point where the person became lost. So there's a whole bunch of different techniques that they're all using GIS to kind of calculate that, to figure out, and again, incorporating the slope, the topography, the weather, the land cover. And then they've also been trying to tie that in with demographics as well, and physical fitness. So it was really interesting. And there was many different ways to go with the data, but just because there seemed to be such a lack in identifying, necessarily people and the activities and why they go missing, not necessarily where they're ending up. I mean, they're very closely linked, but I just wanted to make it more about the statistical, demographic, and land cover change. Okay, and then I have another. Is it possible to see what trails people were on when they were becoming lost? Maybe just cross-referencing land cover with trails for people to use when planning a hike. Yes, that's a great point. I looked to find trails data. I didn't find any specifically for Adirondack Park that I could put into ArcGIS Pro. But that's why I was also waffling between data sets, because Yosemite actually has a really good history of keeping track of that type of stuff, and they had a great trail map, but it looked like that data had been analyzed a lot, so I wanted to focus more on a data set that wasn't. But that's something I can still keep looking into if there's a way to do it, because I really didn't want to have to kind of like map everything in there by hand. Okay, and then I have another one. I'm curious whether the reporting of data shows in the map points was county-based and related to whether counties report more rather than others, or as there were noticeable concentrations of events in some areas, are there geographic features, topography that allows access to more visitors, such as trails, rivers, etc., that have direct impact to the amount of those missing persons? Yes, so there's reporting based upon what county they go missing into, not necessarily the points. I've requested that, so I'm hoping I'm able to get that. There are areas that people tend to go missing. I had the heat map and it seemed like it was more up by like the Lake Placid region. So that's something I definitely need to kind of keep looking at. And that's also why I wanted to look at the land cover, like you said, to see if there's specific areas that people are going missing. Is it in forestry areas? Is it near water? So that is a great comment. Okay. Just a fun question. Have you read The Last Season by Eric Blem about backcountry ranger Randy Morganson's disappearance in California, Sierra Nevada? It has a lot of information about search and rescue. I really enjoyed it. I have not, but thank you, Beth. I will definitely look into that.
Yeah, I would highly recommend that one. Great job, Lindsay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if you want to stop sharing. Up next is Allie Potter, and Allie, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and start.
Okay. Let's see. Of course. Okay, can everyone see the presentation?
Not yet.
Nope.
You have two screens going, or? Oh, there we go. We can see your desktop.
Okay, how about now?
There we go. Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So good afternoon, and thank you for joining me for this presentation. My name is Allie Potter. I hold a bachelor's degree in geoscience and GIS from Murray State University. I've been working as a GIS analyst since 2018, and my previous role working with the Marines at Quantico and the Littoral Analysis Department found in my interest in the subject of my capstone project, which is enhancing the procurement of digital nautical charts to facilitate streamlined littoral analysis via customized web-based program, or for simplicity, just the DNC web application. We'll take a look at key features and functionality of the web application, how I'm looking to build it, and what further advancements I hope to make in the future on this project. Whether you're curious about the process of creating web applications or looking to build your own, I invite you to join me as we explore the design and development of the DNC web application from start to finish. This presentation will focus on a practical challenge faced by the teams in the Littoral Analysis Department and other groups seeking to acquire nautical data from the Maritime Safety Information Department, or MSI, of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, or NGA. In the introduction portion of this presentation, I will discuss a practical challenge faced by the military and other groups seeking to acquire nautical data from the MSI and NGA. This challenge makes it difficult to conduct effective littoral analysis, which is crucial for ensuring maritime safety and security. In the project overview, I will explain how my capstone project aims to enhance the procurement of digital nautical charts and streamline the process of conducting littoral analysis through a customized web-based program. To provide context, I will discuss the practical implications of the challenges faced by the military and other groups seeking to acquire nautical data. And here I will outline my goals and objectives. Next, I will discuss the methodology I propose to use when building the final web application, followed by the challenges and limitations I will or have experienced. In the anticipated results section, I will also give an overview of the customized web-based program I developed, highlighting the key features that make it a valuable solution. Additionally, I will touch upon the potential impact of my project on the field beyond its primary objective, as well as where I hope this project might lead me in the future. By the end of this presentation, I hope you will have a clear understanding of the practical significance of my project, the value it provides to the field, and the potential benefits it would have for the military and other groups seeking to acquire nautical data. So I have a few different key terms that I'll go through one by one. So littoral, this is the wrong version. Okay. The term littoral refers to the zone where the land and sea meet, which is a dynamic and constantly changing environment. Key coastal zones that are depicted in the image that you can't see are the offshore, nearshore, foreshore, and backshore areas. Littoral analysis involves the collection and analysis of various types of data to understand and predict how the littoral environment will behave. The purpose of littoral analysis is to support decision-making related to coastal operations, including military operations, commercial shipping, and disaster response. Littoral analysis can help identify hazards and risks in the coastal environment, such as shoals, reefs, and other obstructions that pose a threat to ships and other vessels. It can also help predict weather and wave conditions, such as well as assess the impact of human activities on the environment. For the purposes of this project, littoral analysis is particularly important because it involves the acquisition and analysis of nautical data. Digital nautical charts in particular are an essential tool for conducting effective littoral analysis, and by streamlining the process for acquiring digital nautical charts, our web application will help facilitate more efficient and accurate littoral analysis, which will ultimately contribute to safer and more secure maritime operations. And the nautical data is just information about marine navigation, including location characteristics of navigational aids, water depths, and shoreline features. Digital nautical charts are the digital chart format used for navigation at sea. They are designed specifically for nearshore navigation and feature a larger scale, which means they provide a more detailed information about shallow waters and coastline features. DNCs are vector-based, which means that they are composed of data points that are used to create digital lines and shapes that represent physical features in the real world. Using DNCs in this project is important because they provide a high level of detail and accuracy that is not always available in other commercially available digital chart formats. And then the electronic navigational chart. Sorry. Yes, the electronic navigational chart are the commercial available options of nautical charts. These are provided by NOAA and help provide real-time ship positioning and collision and grounding avoidance. These charts are updated on a weekly basis. DNC data helps provide detailed information such as soundings, landmarks, navigational aids, topographic features, and can be used for mission planning, route planning, and real-time situational awareness. ENC data includes information such as depth, contours, navigational hazards, and navigational aids, and is designed to be used in electronic chart display and information systems on board ships and other vessels. While both DNC and ENC are vector-based digital nautical chart products, they are designed and used by different groups and for different applications. So for availability, DNC data is available to the military or anyone with approved access, and ENC data is commercially available through a variety of sources. DNC data is classified and encrypted to ensure the security and integrity of military operations and intelligence. ENC data is freely available and not classified. And compatibility is DNC data is used by the military, so it is compatible for all of the military operations, and includes the appropriate symbology and intelligence overlays that would not be found in ENC data. And DNC data is also regularly updated and maintained and has a high level of accuracy and reliability that ENC data may not always see. So now that we've covered the key terms, and the rest of the presentation will be here, I promise. Let's dive into the more in-depth overview of the why behind this project. During my time working in littoral analysis, I noticed a unique challenge faced by military analysis teams. Many soldiers with limited GIS backgrounds are required to take on professional roles in this field, often learning on the job. While this provides a valuable training and experience, it can also be overwhelming and time-consuming, especially when dealing with the complex process of acquiring nautical data. While the focus of these roles is on analysis, a lot of time is spent learning how to extract data from inefficient government websites that don't see regular updates to ensure that they remain user-friendly. This can lead to significant delays and hinder effective littoral analysis, which is crucial for ensuring maritime safety and security. This is where my capstone project comes in. I aim to bridge the gap between limited GIS knowledge and the need for efficient and effective littoral analysis. And I plan to build a web application that will link DNC data to coordinate information, streamlining the nautical chart acquisition process for those in the defense industry. By doing so, I hope to reduce the time spent on administrative tasks and increase the amount of time spent on actual analysis. While my primary goal is to provide ease of use to the Marines at Quantico specifically, I believe that many contractor teams who are working with this data will also benefit from this web application. My hope is that this project will not only improve the procurement of digital nautical charts and streamline the process of conducting littoral analysis, but will also increase the effectiveness and efficiency of the defense industry's efforts to ensure maritime safety and information. So this is the web page that you would normally see when going to acquire DNC data. You would need to register, log in using your CAT card probably, and then you would click on the digital nautical chart in the bottom right-hand corner, where it would take you to this page. You would select which region you have. Unfortunately, there's no way to plug in coordinates for the area that you were looking for. So if you were given an assignment, which is usually a set of coordinates, then you would first need to locate where those are in the world using a third-party software like Google Earth or Google Maps, and then select which region most closely fits where you're going to be looking. Following this, you would pick the scale you are interested in and browse to see what would be available or select all. This would provide you with a list of charts that are organized by chart ID, number, and description. You would download the chart and the scale that you prefer, which comes in a zipped data folder. Unzip it. It comes in a VPF data format, which is not commonly used. So you would automatically have to convert it into a shapefile or a layer file, depending on whether you're using ArcMap or ArcPro. And then you would need to import the data into your map and then format it so that it looks appropriate. Ideally, I would want to take this down to 4 steps. Open up the web app, paste in your coordinates. It would take you to the spot on the map that you need to be looking at, give you a pop-up that would have all of the data that covers that area listed, and then you could just download it from there and then import it into ArcMap or ArcPro. Doing this would be a web scrape from the DNC website, which I have gotten written permission for. I know web scraping is taking data from a website and porting it over into a usable format in Excel or in other situations. Here we would be using Google Sheets, using a Google Sheets API, which would ensure that the data would remain confidential and secure. And this would be a secure process ensuring that the data is safe and only those with the proper credentials would have access to the Google Sheet. And then in step 3, the data from the Google Sheets would be tied to the Esri web app so that clicking on the map would import the matching data sorted in a pop-up. This step would complete the process of streamlining the nautical chart acquisition process for military analysis teams, ultimately improving the efficiency and accuracy of the analysis. Based on the 3 major steps that are outlined, I've anticipated the following results: increased efficiency. By automating the data collection process, we can save significant amounts of time and reduce the potential for human error. This will help military analysis teams to focus on the analysis instead of data collection. And then improved accuracy. By streamlining the nautical chart acquisition process, we can ensure that the data being used for analysis is up to date and accurate. This will improve the overall accuracy analysis of the analysis and reduce the potential for errors. And then enhanced collaboration. By integrating the data into a centralized location, military analysis teams will collaborate more easily and effective, which will allow for improved communication. This is how the user process would ideally look. Starting off, you would have your coordinates, which you can input in whichever format that you prefer. And it would give you the HTML pop-up with a list of all of the scale charts that are available. You would then be able to click and download based on a shape file or a layer file, or you can still use the original version of the VPF if you prefer. Using the original VPF format means that any of the previous scripts that have been built will still be operational. You would still have the full list of metadata that are available. And for the more seasoned GIS users, you would still be able to do any customized analysis that you would need. For the shapefile and layer file, all you would need to do is import it and do analysis. And on the background of this process, using the web scrape, I would compose a list of URL linked zip folders in HTML URL format, as well as their associated scale and keywords. This would make them searchable in a stored Google Sheet. You can unzip and convert the file types into JSON, shapefile, layer file, or VPF, and everything would be linked and searchable. Future ideas for expansion. Right now, the project is only using unclassified, publicly available data. In the future, if this were to use classified data, I would need to work with the littoral analysis team to look at that process. In the future, I would want to be able to look at old data versus present data so that a timeline analysis can be done on certain areas. And then I would also want to incorporate customized tools to help with the analysis process, such as analyzing the change in depth as you approach the shore, or doing customized searches for different types of obstructions, such as coral reef or exposed rock or underwater pipelines. And that's what I have. Does anyone have any questions?
Great job, Ellie. Does anybody have any questions? I guess in the meantime, while people are typing, and I don't know if this is answerable, but I guess when was the last change done to this process, and how did you go about coming up with this new step with eliminate your new process with eliminating some of the steps? And I don't know, I guess how's that going, like at work, or do you have like supervisors encouraging you to do this, or how did this come about, I guess is my main question.
So originally, when I was working in the department, part of my job was training the new Marines who would rotate into the office. And I would get through several of the steps training a Marine, but then they would need to be pulled off for like PT or meetings or active duty. So I would sometimes have to train the same Marine 3 or 4 or 5 different times on these same steps when really they needed to be spending most of their time doing analysis work, because that's what they were there for, not for data acquisition. And I got a little frustrated, and I wanted to find a way to simplify the process so that they could get the coordinates, plop it in, get the data they needed, and just go from there. And it would save everyone a lot of time and hassle.
Gotcha. So you knew the need better than anybody else. So there's a question there from Ryan.
Let's see. How do I get back to the chart?
Yeah, if you stop sharing, there you go. Now you should be able to get the chat open.
Okay, I got you. Last one I see is an email address.
Go to right above that one. It's from Ryan. Do you see it?
Are the users for your project people using desktop GIS on land, or will also be used by users on out at sea? Wondering type of connectivity and software would be required. So I have designed this for users on land. I don't know what connectivity is available at sea. I didn't work in those types of situations, but a lot of the analysis was done in the office, and then the information would be sent out to the people who needed it. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
There's a question from Jim.
What development platform do you plan to use? Yes, Esri. Everything, I'll be using a JavaScript API web app, and it'll all be Esri software, because that's all they use in the office. When do you anticipate the first folks being able to go through the process with the new method? As soon as I get the web application working. I'm still stuck on one final step with the Excel credentials. I'm going to send it to the team lead, and he'll work through it with some data trials, and then we'll convert it into the classified data format, so everything is on above board and it could be used immediately.
Great. Thanks very much. It sounds very practical. Oh, one more question from Todd.
With the transition from DNC to ENC, Navy programs relying on DNC for navigational and non-navigational programs have been directed to plan for DNC termination in 2025. Have you looked into how this may impact the use of DNCs? that'll be great because DNCs are so much more easily accessible. But for now, everyone is still using DNCs. So while they are still using DNCs, I would want to help make that more accessible for the Marines. Once DNCs no longer need to be used, then my web app will no longer be necessary, which honestly, that's great. I just want the process to be easier for everybody.
Okay, great job, Allie. Thank you. And Todd just had a follow-up that agreed with you.
Yes.
Okay, and if you could put your email address into the chat, that would be good in case anybody has a follow-up. And I saw that Lindsay put hers there as well, so that's great. And Everardo Balboa is up next. So Ever, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and start.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Give me 1 second. Let me just. Let me share my screen. Good afternoon. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. I want to thank you, first of all, for allowing me to present my project proposal on this day. I also want to thank my advisor, Professor Jim Detweiler, for guiding me through this whole process. A little bit about myself. My name is Everardo Balboa, and I live in South Texas. I work as a right-of-way agent for a utility company that serves over 2.3 million customers in some areas of Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. And my job as a right-of-way agent is to acquire private lands or private rights for the installation of new gas lines and above-ground facilities that are usually needed to serve additional customers or for potential growth projects. My project is the implementation of a mobile application for management of right-of-way acquisition data. I will be discussing the following in my presentation, which is what is a right-of-way, the challenges that we face as in the right-of-way acquisition process, the pros and challenges of using mobile technology, and my proposed action plan to improve the current process that we have in place. An introduction to my project is, why is right-of-way management critical? The critical part of the job is to be able to provide valuable data before any expenditures are incurred. We need to provide additional information to assist in the route planning, which is owner information, permission to survey the property, obstacles that we have at that particular corridor location, and provide a cost analysis. When I say permission to survey the properties in the state of Texas, before we actually go set foot on a piece of property and do surveys, we have to get authorization from the landowner before we set foot. So I believe that our mobile technology can easily provide this data to the engineer, and in other words, our requesters, our management team. Also, I will be presenting some of the questions that or recommendations while meeting with the landowners of what they have, which is in this case would be pipe depth requirements, the width that they're willing to sell, the product type that they'll allow us to transport, even though we're a natural gas industry, that's what we do. The number of pipelines that they'll allow, either is exclusive or non-exclusive, those private lands that they're selling to us. And what that means, if it's exclusive, it would only be for us for the installation of our facilities. If it's non-exclusive, then they'll go ahead and allow any other utility or city personnel to install their utility lines, either adjacent or within the same area. Also, some of the issues, I guess, that the landowners have, either they will allow surface equipment above ground. And if yes, then there are the fence requirements. They usually have a lot of type of fencing that they want. And not only the facilities, but obviously they have other requests once we start meeting with them. They will also allow us, either if we have additional construction space, or they would allow us to do that, or send us to the adjacent property. What is a private right-of-way? Well, pretty much it's private rights that allow utility company to install facilities on private property. For example, in this exhibit, you will see that there's a road there. Obviously, that is public right-of-way. In other words, anybody can use it, any utility company with the appropriate permits from the owner of that roadway that would allow us to do that. But where we come in is the adjacent lands, which is private land. That is where we meet with the landowners and we start discussing the type of requirements or the type of concerns that the landowner has. And at the end of the day, this is exactly what we want to do. We want to acquire private lands to install our facilities. The challenges that we face during the right-of-way acquisition process. The current process that we have in place is the right-of-way department, we get involved about 2 to 3 weeks after the design has been done. We receive our notifications through a program called Microsoft Dynamics 365, which it is an intelligent program that helps businesses manage projects by centralizing all aspects of it, from design to closing. We use this program, but this program for us in the right-of-way department, we get everything is paper-based. There's no electronic information, anything that we do that the right-of-way agent does. Everything's just paper-based, and I will be showing you the way we have our current process. I will be presenting how the engineer creates a project and send to us, the right-of-way department, using the Dynamics program. How the right-of-way department gets notified once the project is in queue, and how notes are provided by the group or by the right-of-way department. In other words, again, everything is paper-based. We, the right-of-way department, we have to take notes, handwritten notes, transfer them to a Word document, and input them into this program. This is my project is to facilitate this data, but do it electronically. The process starts with the request for services. Goes to our engineering group. Our engineering group creates this program, creates this dashboard or this project in Microsoft Dynamics. And so you can see that it's just a basic address and work order numbers that are associated with it. Work orders. Documents are presented in PDF formats. Once the requester, in this case would be their engineering group, provides to the right-of-way department this particular documents, which is just PDFs and no electronic Excel sheets or anything of that nature that we can populate, that we can streamline the process. After the engineering has added the project or papers or design to this particular program, they'll just click save, and the right-of-way department gets a notification saying there is a project for acquisition in the queue. This is all done. Again, I saw paper-based engineering right-of-way department is getting 2-3 weeks already behind, meaning the design has already been completed or has already been selected. And this is where we start, and this is where the challenges begin as well. The current process in the office is, once we get that information through Dynamics, we have to identify location of the property using the appraisal district maps if available. We print out landowner tax cards. We do research deed through the county clerk's office in all of our service areas. In Texas, we have a program called Texas File that has records that we need, and we actually print out. Some of them vary from 1910 to current date. Some of them are from the 80s. And whenever we don't find documents, we have to go out there and again, make copies of everything that we have, create PDFs, and put them back in Dynamics 365. Once the data is gathered by the agent, we do a site visit with papers in hand, and we identify the landowners and confirm ownership by proper ID itself. This is the notes that we as agents, we collect out in the field and we transfer over to our Dynamics 365. This is the type of information that I am proposing we collect in a mobile application. These types of questions or this type of concerns is what we deal with on a daily basis with landowners and their recommendations that we have. Now, even if they recommend or we listen to their concerns, sometimes we can proceed with what we had planned, or we go ahead and do alternative routes or change locations. In other words, use public lands instead of public right-of-ways, instead of acquiring that. This is the area in Dynamics 365 where we provide, when I say we right-of-way department, once we collect all the data, all the notes, handwritten notes, and everything that we have, we convert them into Word document or PDF and insert them here into this particular tab of Dynamics 365, where we share it with the project team. In this case, would be operation groups and engineering group. The pros and cons of using the mobile technology of what we're trying to do is mobile technology has proven obviously to increase speed and accuracy. I believe that with the mobile technology in hand, we can expedite a lot of the questions and concerns that our operations and engineering group have and get ahead of the game about 2 to 3 weeks. Providing this type of information can actually have a better understanding of what we're dealing with out in the field. Some of the challenges is the rugged mobile devices, antiquated protocols that we currently have in place at my place of employment. Those protocols are not for right-of-way department, but used for other departments, those data collection plans that they have. What we have is also the extreme weather and connectivity issues. I live in South Texas, which is the southern tip of Texas, and connectivity issues on all mobile devices are kind of in and out. We don't have, I guess, the greatest connectivity in this area. So what I was thinking is using the mobile application, either MGIS field maps and collecting all the data necessary. And whenever we have connectivity issues, either just transferring over to the cloud or to the actual requester. In this case would be engineering department. There are 4 steps for a successful acquisition project. We need landowner identification, confirmation, meeting with the landowners, and finally, the planning stage. Some of the challenges that we have with the current process is, again, we go back with the paper base, but with the mobile application that I have in mind, I believe that those challenges can be met if we were to provide this type of information to the designer. Those integration, the application that I have in mind will have integration of public records parcel data from the appraisal district, where we can do the identification. We'll also want to configure the application to do quick calculation based on existing appraisal data. The quick estimate is going to be done. Everything was going to be based on square footage. This type of information is provided from every appraisal district. The ownership identification. The plan is to have an image stored in the cloud. The image of the existing warranty deed. In other words, do the legwork at the office, save the deeds in a local servers or the cloud, where we can have access by a single click, either a hyperlink in the smart form that I'm proposing, where the land agent can actually go out there, do confirmation, owner confirmation, provide the deed, and get this type of information, take photographs as well. The proposed application sole purpose would be to assist the land agent to capture critical information about our proposed route, the conditions, survey permission, and the estimate. This is an example of what I see this application assisting the land agents, meaning, for example, the photo on the left, it has a proposed right-of-way acquisition of 50 by 1,200 linear feet. 50 foot wide, 1,200 linear feet. The proposed application would also have the ability to capture a photograph to have land conditions to show what we are going to be dealing with, additional expenditures that are going to be incurred, meaning that it's not a straight shot, meaning that there's some brush that would be nearly cleared, and obviously some expenditures to clear this particular area. But once we meet with the landowners itself, we can also provide a quick estimate of the costs of the acquisition, which can actually help decision makers decide if this is a feasible project or this is a feasible area or not. They'll usually ask us if acquiring right away it's easy. It's easy to acquire private lands if you just pay whatever the landowner is requesting. But that is not the case with us. We have to do fair market value. So there's a lot of studies that go into play before we can actually acquire right away. Other departments also have to, we have to be involved in the route planning, the route design. And I believe that if we can gather this information, critical information way ahead of time, we can minimize the project time frame either by 2 to 3 weeks, and we can also minimize cost of the project. The plan is to create a mobile application to be used in any mobile device to capture landowner information. What you saw in the previous slides will come from this prototype of the smart form that I have in mind. We'll have like the track number, property ID, the name of the landowner, but more importantly would be the survey permission. Are we granted? Yes or no? The appraisal district data, that's where we would have the market value, the assessed value of how much of the land, also the square footage, and this is where we would do calculations. This information is what's going to be shared with the project designer or engineering group or decision makers. The vision of the final product would be to create a web map that would be linked to the existing easement or right-of-way layer that is currently in place at my place of employment. What we don't have yet is right-of-way parcels. So the final product, my vision for the final product is to have something similar to the Department of Colorado of Transportation, which is right-of-way parcels. Anything that we acquired would be mapped out. Additional data would be captured. For example, the attributes that we talked about would be the width, the cost, landowner information, copy of deeds, and more importantly, copy of recorded documents where it would give us the land rights to do our project. Or I also have or we can use similar to what the Texas Department of Transportation has, which is just a linear link from point A to point B, and just add hyperlinks and additional attributes of existing land rights. But all this data would be captured through the mobile application before any project gets done. The timeline to implement the project, I anticipate developing a prototype in smart forms during the month of this month, May 15 to June 15. Probably take me a month to develop it, make sure that I capture all the data that is necessary or all the fields that is necessary. June 15 to July 15 would be to create a web map that will be storing the data that is gathered, any right-of-way data that is being gathered. It will be stored in WGS 84 Web Mercator. And the reason for that is my area has different coordinate systems. And plus it's a web map, and that's where the coordinate system should be for any web application, GIS web application. The trial run I plan on doing on 2 projects, 2 different locations, either in the southern tip of Texas where I live, or out west over by the El Paso area, or maybe one in Texas and one in Oklahoma. During the month of July, I want to present the results to my employer, the right-of-way group. If acceptable, then present it to the management group for the implementation company-wide. And during the fall of this year, 2023, I plan to present the results in my final project in the last class of 596B. And with that, I conclude my proposal for a mobile application for right-of-way acquisition data. And if you all have any questions regarding the mobile application or utility, by all means, thank you.
Great job, Ever. It looks like Ryan has a question already.
I don't. Ryan, okay, sounds like getting. Yes, public, does a public available parcel layer already exist? For most of the areas, Ryan, they do. But the parcel that I was thinking about doing is drawing it freehand over that existing base layer and creating our own parcel data with the cost estimates that we're doing for project planning. This will not be replacing the parcel data, but just grabbing information from the existing parcel data to create an estimate for project development. I'm not sure that answers this question. Let's see, for landowners, is the only option available. I'm sorry, I forgot that. Is the only option available for landowners is to sell property? Are there no lease options available? For us, sir, it would only be to sell property. We do not do lease because our utility company is not a production company. All we do is we provide services either for heating and cooking. We have it's a utility company distribution business. So we don't have pad sites or drilling equipment. We don't deal with gas wells. How we do is we transport from point A to point B, and distribution systems to homes and commercial and industrial areas. Are there sales limited to the surface or mineral rights involved? No, no mineral rights. It's only above ground. No, nothing below ground. Whenever we buy, the acquisition is just for the installation of pipeline. The mineral rights, we do not do that. And whenever we do surface, we do it as an easement and only for surface rights, not anything below ground. We don't do that. So no, mineral rights are not involved. Ms. King, yes, Professor Detweiler, myself had discussed conference or locations to do the presentation.
Okay, good job.
Thank you. Was there any more questions?
Any
I'm not sure if I answered the questions that they were asking.
It sounds like you did. It said Ryan confirmed that you did, and it sounds like you answered Fritz's questions well. I guess just one quick follow-up. I was wondering if you, yeah, Fritz says yes.
Okay.
I was curious about if you have to do anything beyond designing the mobile application. Do you have to deal with the acquisitions at all?
Yes, I am the right-of-way agent. We manage several contractors that assist us in the acquisition process. So the plan is to create this application because as we speak right now, as it stands right now, the right-of-way department, we get involved after the design has already been done. So meaning whenever we go out there, we have to go and do the data collection from the landowner, take photos, look at the corridor, and sometimes we have to come back to the designer and provide this information to them and tell them it's not going to work because there's concrete, there's already a building there, there's landscaping or a garden or something. So the plan is to be involved in the right away to be involved in the design phase since the very beginning. Whenever they ask, we have this project, be involved since the very beginning, go out there, do this data collection, bring it back to the designer so that he or she can see what's out there, and then they can make the decision either to change alignment or proceed. But at least they'll have that data already in hand. And I'm thinking about doing this application and send it once we're out there in the field. In other words, if I'm in El Paso, out in the field, we can collect this data. Whenever the connectivity happens, send it directly to the designer so that they can have it already in place.
Great. I was just thinking how your presentation is a little bit similar to Alicia's from Friday, how you both have to deal with eminent domain a little bit. And I was thinking how it would be so nice if you could just sit behind your computer and develop the mobile app and not have to go out and deal with that. So
Yeah, no.
But it sounds very, very practical. So great job.
Thank you.
Okay, so Ever, if you want to put your email address in the chat, that'd be great. And then we have one final presentation. I guess stop sharing your screen. And our last presenter of the day is Grace McMillan. So Grace, whenever you're ready.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can. And so as soon as Ever stops
Yes.
sharing, then yeah.
Okay, share. I'm trying to stop that. Let's see.
It's fine. We're patient.
No, not share.
There should be, I think if you hover at the top, there should be a stop sharing option.
Reactions, I know.
I think I could do it for you. Would you like me to do that?
Oh, here it is. Here it is.
There you go. Perfect.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, And is my screen showing?
Yes, it is.
Perfect. All right. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Grace McMillan, and I'll be presenting my final capstone project to you all. The title of my project is Predicting the Fall of a Region, a Spatio-Temporal Analysis of Russia-Backed Separatists in the Donbass. My advisor for this was Dr. Gregory Thomas. He's seen this project since 2020 and been through all of it with me. So luckily we're finally at the tail end. Also, I apologize for my raspy voice. I'm getting over a little bit of a cold. So for my project, the entire purpose of it is, as most people are aware, there is an active conflict going on in Ukraine. With that being said, that region has experienced conflict for quite a long time, specifically since 2014. However, there have been agencies and organizations collecting data that are about conflict that have kind of assisted with being able to create predictive analysis in the area for these types of conflicts. So the agenda for this is to provide a background of the area, give you all a current status and update of events that have happened, talk about the methodology and models that I've used for the predictive analysis, the data that I've used, which is primarily the ACLED data source, the armed conflict location and event data warehouse, the workflow that I use to get to this, and then the results and references that I've provided. So Ukraine is situated in Eastern Europe. It's the second largest European country and covers approximately 600,000 square kilometers. Most recently, the population is of 43 million. In the eastern part, there are two oblasts, which are areas within Ukraine, called Luhansk and Donetsk. And those areas are particular for this project because they have seen the most conflict, particularly from not only Russia as a state actor, but also Russia-backed separatists since 2014 on. And these two areas have been key in the conflict that Ukraine has faced today. So Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, and then last year in 2022 stated that it annexed Donetsk and Luhansk that I mentioned earlier. There's been proxy forces within that area, and they've posed a threat to the security of Ukraine and Europe as a whole for the past 8 to 12 years. It's caused thousands of deaths and displaced tons of people. It's also caused a bunch of damage to the infrastructure, such as airfields and factories within the area as well. And that's stretched obviously all the way into other parts of Ukraine. The military actions caused a sharp decline in the industrial output for the country. And that started in 2014 and 2016, and Ukraine is still facing that today. So moving on to the forces that have affected that region are the DPR military, which consists of mercenaries from Russia, as well as locals that are supportive of this movement as well. And their tactics range from conducting operations from seizures of the administrative buildings, as well as combat and killing of civilians in the areas. The current status as of 2023, there's still an ongoing conflict. Russia currently controls most of the eastern part of Ukraine. And since the war was controlled, the biggest question is, does this area offer any strategic significance? Why is it important to study this case? So predictive analysis for future conflicts. So since 2014, data from ACLED, which I'll get into later, has been collected for this area. It goes into 6 primary political instabilizers, such as battles, explosions, and violence against civilians. And the purpose of this is to use that data set to see if we can take that and overlay it within the administrative boundaries to see what areas have been targeted in the past, as well as what areas might be targeted in the future. This is important primarily for military operations for not only Ukraine to defend itself, but also for any other nation supporting it. And so there's really fantastic geoprocessing tools that I'll show later in this presentation that can kind of answer some of these questions. From a geography standpoint, the questions we look to answer are, does the geography of the Donbass specifically provide more than the bordering region of Russia? What are the short and long-term implications? Does the area give to Russia as opposed to the other areas? And then what is the political objective by partially occupying this country prior to actually invading it in a war? So there's two primary models that I used in order to create this predictive analysis. I wanted to use more than just hotspot analysis and just create a kernel density map, because I think that since there are multiple years worth of data, I thought that that was a great opportunity to use these two tools. So the first one is the space-time cube from defined locations. And it's how space and time change in a specific geographic area. And the good thing about that is that the conflict data could be overlaid within the small administrative boundaries. So I took it all the way down to the level 3 boundaries within Ukraine, because they're much smaller within those two oblasts that I mentioned earlier, so that we can really start to pinpoint where these attacks are taking place. From that data set, I then use the random forest method, which combines the output of multiple decision trees to reach a single result. And I'll go into that methodology later on into the presentation. So from the space-time cube, just going into kind of the methodology, the data layer that I inputted was the ACLID data set. And then what I needed to do, I needed to join it to its administrative boundary and essentially project it so they were both on the same projection. The time field was mandatory for this, and luckily the data set was able to provide that for me. Each event is essentially just a snapshot in time, and then that would be used for further analysis. That time field comes in handy because when I do my forest-based forecast, I use those steps of time. So whether I used days, weeks, or months, that would essentially drive my output into seeing when the predicted conflict would happen. I'll show you examples later, but for example, if I used a time step interval of 1 month, then I could essentially step anywhere from 1 to 7 months in the future to kind of see where my output would lead me. In the forest-based forecast, I use that same space-time cube output to then build my model, and then I could choose the number of decision trees that my project was going to do to then create my map of prediction. Here is just a brief example if you wanted to visually see how I got to the endpoint. Now I used a different data set that's pictured here. This is just an example of using the Global Terrorism Database. It's another data set I've used before. However, it is not as current as the one I'm using, and it uses a lot different elements that I would prefer to take out of. The good thing about the armed conflict location event database is that most of the variables are centered around war-torn conflict countries, whereas the terrorism database will sometimes pull crime, and I wanted that factor out of my data set because I didn't want it to influence the predictive analysis too much. So as I mentioned earlier, so the ACLID data set that I pulled from has 6 political disorder variables in it. Battles, which are classified as violent interactions between 2 groups. Explosions, which are where one side uses remote weapons, for example, artillery against civilians or infrastructure. Violence against civilians, where a group inflicts violence upon non-combatants. Protests, generally just public demonstrations. They don't always have to be violent, but sometimes are. Riots, categorized as mobs engaged in destructive acts. And strategic developments. So those are a little bit trickier to quantify, but things such as recruitment drives would signify strategic development, anything where a bigger actor is trying to influence through actions within an area. So that's where I got those data sets from. And then I obviously needed my administrative boundaries in order to quantify those to a specific area. And I got those from the World Bank. I was able to use level 0 through 3. Level 2 was the Oblast. So when I mentioned Luhansk and Donetsk, however, I wanted the smaller level 3 ones, just to kind of pinpoint the areas where these attacks were happening. My workflow started with case studies, not only from Ukraine in these areas, because it has been studied for quite some time, but also other areas such as the Indochina Peninsula, where terrorism has occurred and where predictive analysis has been used to try to determine hotspots. I used multiple different conflicts across the world to kind of do my reference guide and kind of determine the best methodology. And that is essentially where I determined where I wanted to go more than just kernel density hotspot map. I wanted to use this unique tool within ArcGIS Pro to determine the map and the predictive analysis. The databases I spoke of in the previous slide, where I got my 2 data sets, and then just honing down on the specifics and reporting to kind of develop a more refined product to determine where these attacks are happening and where the potential is for them to happen into the future. To summarize, the administrative boundaries combined with the attack data set produces a result of predictive analysis. So moving on into the fun stuff. So this is an overview in the top left of the ACLA data that is from 2018 all the way to 2023. Right, as you can see in the bottom chart, that battles are second, and then the top variable are explosions and remote violence. Now the chart's a little misleading because the data is current and up to date. It goes up until 2023. So there hasn't been a sharp decline. However, because we haven't even gotten about halfway into the year, there is significant less than the year that Ukraine was invaded. But it does give you an overview of where these attacks are happening. Primarily the eastern part of Ukraine, the south and the north, and then also in the capital of Kyiv. Moving on into the right side, this is where you can see the small administrative boundaries in the 2 focus areas of Donetsk and Luhansk, where the summarized data is notated, with the darker red attacks being more concentrated, where the light yellow and orange areas are less concentration of conflict events from 2018 to 2023. I wanted to get you guys just a brief overview before I break it into the year-by-year analysis. So this is essentially what the Space-Time Cube geoprocessing tool did with my analysis. I had to do a little bit of the cleaning of the data first. I needed to separate that entire data set into year portions because essentially I would use one year to predict another, and then I would use the following year to determine the accuracy of the data set. So here you can see the map where in purple from light to dark is an uptrend starting from 90% confidence to 99% confidence of these areas. This tool takes the space and time within each of those locations and creates a trend anywhere from 1 to 3 over time to see if the activity is increasing and decreasing. And that took just the count of the conflict data for the year, specifically for this one, 2018. As I noted on the right-hand side, the top 4 areas are the smaller notated ones on the map that had signs of an uptrend of violence for the area. This is essentially taking that same data and turning it into a forecast model to predict. Now, this isn't taking any of the 2019 data yet. It's just taking the trends from 2018 on and creating both a graph and a map of the output if you were to take the data set for the 28th of January in 2019. So as I mentioned earlier, the time steps that you can do, whether that weeks, months, days, I chose to do 1 month into the future. And so this is kind of essentially what it looks like. The area that I have notated on the map, you can see over time it's increased from January to November and then slightly dropped down. The blue is the actual event, and then the orange is the predictive analysis. And that is helpful because I can use this model to compare it with 2019's data and see if it is on track or if the model needs to be adjusted. The way that I would adjust this model is to take the number of trees and the number of outliers to see if I need to refine it, if my numbers of conflict data are not matching up. And this data is unique in that I can do that. Obviously, if I were to choose a data set that were current, and I would need to wait a few years, but I think that this is a very unique situation where you can see over time whether the data can be validated to see how accurate it is. Here's a side-by-side comparison of the 2019 Space Cube bins alongside with its forecast for 2020. So this is a better representation of where you can see where there's an uptrend and also a downtrend in that Luhansk and Donetsk area. You can also see towards the center of Ukraine and the north, where there's also been an uptrend in data sets. Now, taking that into the next month into the year, once you take the time cubes, now you can see where the model predicts where these areas are going to be more high concentrated, which are still just the eastern part of Ukraine and then also the capital. So overall, in conclusion, I think that these are 2 very fantastic models for predictive analysis. I think that it can assist in both the country's ability to use its resources to prevent attacks, also assist its citizens during conflicts such as this. And I also think that can help any assisting country with its efforts in mitigating its resources when committing them to a conflict like Ukraine. This slide just has my references if you are interested, and pending your questions, that is the conclusion of my brief.
Great job, Grace. Do we have some questions? There's one there from Fritz.
Let's see. Is it in the chat?
Oh, he wrote it to me directly. Fritz,
Okay.
can you post that into the everyone part? Let me see if I can. Here, I'm just gonna read it to you because I think it's hard to copy out. Yeah, you can't copy out of the chat for some reason. Okay, so Fritz says, great job with your capstone project. Do you know the level of uncertainty with either the conflict data or the prediction method? And then aside from the reported confidence level, are there uncertainty data that could be used to create maps of uncertainty in the data or the method?
Yes, so to answer your question, I used an Excel sheet for the uncertainty, and I basically created I copied the results from each geographic area for what the prediction was, and then I took that same date of what date or what the conflict actually was for that date, and I created like a root mean square error, and then the standard deviation for each year. And then that came out in my final report, but I did use an Excel sheet to do that. As far as mapping it out, I didn't create like a map of it, but I did use that Excel document to check to see what the uncertainty was. We have been hearing. Oh, okay. So the question is, we've been hearing from the 596A students where they will present their projects when they are complete. You're presenting here because you're on a bit of a time crunch due to completing 2 master's degrees. Where might you share your work beyond this group so that it can be well utilized? So I would definitely, so I work for MGA on the civilian side. So my idealistic customer would either be the like combatant commands like UCOM, if I were able to present to them, just to help their geospatial analysts with different tools that they might not have available, or honestly, any smaller military GeoInt unit that I could share it with on the unclassified side, I would do that as well.
And Todd has a suggestion. And yeah, I was thinking about the classified element of it. So this sort of serves double duty as of not needing to present somewhere where you can't show everything.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's awesome with the ACLA database that it is completely unclassed. So I can share this kind of information in this environment.
Okay, well, in case if we don't have any additional questions here, if you can put your email address in the chat, Grace, that would be great. But fantastic job. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Okay, so that concludes the presentations for the spring 2. So thanks to everybody for coming and watching and evaluating. I just sent an email with all of the links to fill out the evaluations. And I've asked if you can try to get them done by Wednesday night at midnight. And I think there are 14 for each of you to do. So it shouldn't take too long. They don't take too long to complete. And then as long as everybody completes them by then, I will try to share them Thursday with everybody. So have a great day.